You hear a little Cody Jinks, you start thinking Kolik's coming out of the bullpen. Different song, but same artist. We welcome you back in. TexAgs Radio presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Gabe Bock with you. And we're headed down the stretch as we go to the 12th Man Technology Video Hotline with author, TexAgs Baseball contributor, very good friend of the show, the site, and me personally, Heath Clary. Heath did something no man had ever done before, and that is walk into the coach of a college baseball team and say, Coach, can I go wherever you guys go? Locker room, clubhouse, dugout, travel some. I mean, be around the entire team and then document it all. And he got an opportunity to do that for the 2019, a very interesting up and down, injury-plagued Aggie baseball season 2019. All it takes is everything you got. And all you got to do is go to allittakeseverythingyougot.org. No, I'm just kidding. AggieBaseballBook.com is the best way to do it. Stocking stuffer galore. The Aggie in your life's going to need it. They don't just want it, they need it. AggieBaseballBook.com. He's flashing it right now. Heath, welcome to the show, man. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, Gabe. Thanks for having me on.
Flash that book again, will you? Because, I somehow forgot mine.
Yeah, well, let's just read your little quote on the back.
Oh,
this is a must-read for any Aggie or fan of college baseball. So, that's AggieBaseballBook.com. Thank you for having me on, Gabe.
I appreciate it. Appreciate it very much, no doubt. Now, first off, what are you doing these days? I want to know when a second book's coming. What's keeping you busy?
Well, second book is coming.
Oh, really?
Pretty soon. Yes, sir. It'll also be about college baseball, and I had a lot of time to write with the pandemic and, having to kind of stay away from people. So it was a good opportunity.
Do you have a real job right now while you're trying to become an author and establish yourself with multiple books, or is this basically what you're all in on right now?
I do, yes. So I had to put my finance degree from A&M to work. So I'll be working in commercial insurance sales.
Okay.
I've already have the job. I haven't been able to actually be boots on the ground, though, because of the pandemic. So I am employed, but still waiting to actually get away from kind of the computer stuff and actually get on the ground.
All right, to the Aggie listening, and they're like, yeah, I remember 2019, and you think about Blom's Grand Slam to walk off West Virginia, but that was a regional team that lost in the regional. So not one that you're going to go down as an Aggie baseball fan and say, that's just a banner year for Aggie baseball. But why should the Aggie baseball fan, specifically that fan out there listening to this show, and there are hundreds, thousands of them probably, who love Aggie baseball, why should they buy and read this book, Heath, of the 2019 team?
Well, I think in a few years when Zach Deloach, Braden Shoemake, John Doxakis, Asa Lacy, those four and maybe more are
Christian
all playing.
Roa.
Yeah, Roa are all playing in the MLB. You'll look back to this team as one that had a ton of talent. And in the book, I try to profile all of them, kind of tell their stories, even away from the field, how they developed, how they grew up, how they became the elite college baseball players that they were. And although they only made it to the regionals, we still feel like they should have made it to Omaha. They had a lot of injuries and some underperforming hitting. But it was still a great team with a lot of talent. And like I said, I think all those guys will play in the big leagues pretty soon.
Well, let's hit a few stories in there. And I asked you to kind of give me some that maybe we had, because we've had you on 2 or 3 times. I want to make sure we didn't just repeat ourselves. And you sent me a pretty outstanding list. And I think we need to talk a little bit about Lacy, because last year he was arguably the best pitcher in college baseball, and then the season got cut short. That still stings that we didn't get to see a full Asa Lacy and what he was able to do in 20. We got to see a full year in 19. You covered it. You were in there. What you got to experience and then write about was the rise and that real season 2 development of a guy that would go down to be the highest drafted A&M player ever.
Right. And remember, when he came in his sophomore year, there was a lot of excitement around him. I know we talked about it a lot. He had a high ceiling. He did pretty good his freshman year, but there was still a little bit of, well, let's see him do it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he did from the very first start. He added a couple pitches to his repertoire. He had been a fastball changeup only guy his freshman year, pitching out of the bullpen. And then immediately he becomes the number 2 starter after a dominant fall. And he starts throwing 2 breaking pitches and his changeup got even better. And he started also throwing in the mid to high 90s with his fastball. So he quickly became, an almost unhittable starting pitcher. And even off the field, he's a very high intelligence. He watches all the film of MLB starters. He's always trying to pick up things. He watched film, so specifically the year I was there, he was watching Clayton Kershaw and Trevor Bauer to kind of pick up the slider and curveball that those guys throw. He's a very intelligent guy, and that's why his ceiling continues to get even higher, and I wasn't surprised how high he got drafted.
Well, it definitely worked because he developed those pitches, had a 4-pitch mix that he could throw it. I mean, a real great 3-pitch mix and a developing fourth. That really helped him as a draft prospect. I think it's kind of hard for guys who impact one game a week to be great leaders. Some of them can do it, though. But I thought despite that, going against pitchers sometimes, especially starters, because they're just kind of hanging out, they're doing their work, but they're not impacting every single game. But I thought Doc Zackus is one of the best starting pitching leaders that I've seen come through under Childress.
I would definitely agree with that. And Lacy was very good, too. Those guys – being in the dugout, both those guys were very active. Sometimes in the MLB on TV, you see the guys just kind of sitting there in a hoodie and they're not really doing a whole lot because they're in the big leagues. But in this A&M dugout, Docs and Lacy were always very engaged, very active. They were always talking to Coach Childress, trying to fire up the hitters, even kind of trying to give the hitters some advice on what they're seeing from the pitcher. And Docs, he was just a fiery competitor. Who would get pretty angry during his starts, and that allowed him to pitch better.
Zach Deloach is an interesting case study because, highly recruited player, could have signed out of high school, started with that bang as a freshman, had some ups and downs, and then really hit that sophomore wall that you covered and depicted. But then kind of the post story is what we got to see in 20. Now, we didn't get to see enough of it, but he was one of the better position players and outfielders in the SEC, and then got drafted in the second round. What did you see when you were profiling and following Zach Deloach closely during a struggling year?
Yeah, definitely. So going into the book, I expected him to be, one of the better players on that team, and he ended up hitting 200.
Yep.
But, there was just so many things. I think his size, his athleticism, his ability to hit for power, he gained a little bit of weight in the year I was there, a good weight, and continued to get bigger because he wants to hit for more power, which is what he did. So he definitely hit his ceiling in a good way, kind of reached his potential because we always knew that Zach was a great player. He showed it as a freshman. Mm-hmm. He showed it other times as well. And he had a few hot streaks during 2019. But, he ended up hitting not as good as he wanted to. But he went to the Cape Cod League. That's where he kind of reinvigorated himself. And he had a great year. I wish it would have lasted longer because I want to see, what his final batting average would have been and how many extra base hits he could have racked up.
For sure. All right, last thing for you, Heath. We got to cut it a little bit short. We want everybody to buy this book. All it takes is everything you got inside the clubhouse and the dugout and embedded with the 2019 Aggie Baseball team. Heath Clary, go to AggieBaseballBook.com. Right now, you're heading into winter meetings, semester's over. These end of fall season exit meetings as they head into the that break and the holiday, Christmas break and everything else. You kind of give us you were right there. You experienced some of those exit meetings. What do you think is going on? What do you think the players are taking from the coaches right now as they're heading into to this long, about month off?
Well, so the Monday after the Omaha Cup, the coaches make them submit a survey where they rank every pitcher, order from best to worst, every hitter from best to worst, and they also have to, on this 1 to 5 scale, they have to rate each of their teammates on how tough they are, how coachable they are, all these different categories. And then when the player gets into the exit meeting with, if they're a pitcher, they're with Coach Childress. If they're a hitter, they're with Seeley. And it was Bolt, but now I'm sure it's Kaye. They get to see, okay, here's what your teammates are saying about you. And they also have to self-evaluate. So they have to put what they think they are. And so if you got a guy who is about even, like he says what his teammates do, well, that's good. But if if his own ratings are way higher than what his teammates are saying, you got problems, right? Because that guy has an overinflated view of himself, right. And so that will get brought up. And then they just give the typical stuff like, here's what you need to work on. And it just gives guys confidence and inspiration going into that long several-week break. I'm sure it's even longer this year because of the virus, where the coaches don't have access to them, and it's up to them to, maintain their throwing program, eat right, work out, so they come in shape in the spring.
It's fascinating. I would presume Ross Stripling was dead last his freshman year on that list after the fall, and look what happened. I would presume Jonathan Maroney was dead last on that list after his first fall. He opened up that freshman season in the opening day lineup, hitting cleanup, and we saw some incredible moments from him too. Great stuff, Heath. I appreciate it very much. The book is awesome. Hope everybody buys it and continues to purchase it. Purchase multiple, because a lot of us listening have a lot of Aggies in our life, and I think this would be a good Christmas read. Thank you so much, Heath.
Thank you, Gabe. Have a good one.
There you go. Heath Clary, AggieBaseballBook.com. We'll take a time out. We'll come back and wrap up the Tuesday edition. TexAgs Radio presented by David Gardner's Jewelers.